Then I claim her. The Alpha King's voice rolled through the royal hall, deep and absolute, silencing every whisper beneath the vaulted ceiling. Grace Miller remained on her knees at the center of the moonlit floor, one hand pressed against her chest as the last warmth of the broken mate bond faded beneath her skin. Only moments earlier, Ryan Blackwood had stood before the entire Northern Realm and rejected her. Now his father had risen from the obsidian throne and claimed her before them all. Ryan's confident smile disappeared. Beside him, Victoria Reed lowered her jeweled hand, the silver bracelet around her wrist catching the cold light. Hundreds of wolves stared at Grace as though she had transformed into someone they no longer recognized. But Grace could barely hear them. Her heartbeat filled her ears. Alexander Blackwood descended the marble steps slowly, his dark ceremonial coat sweeping behind him, his silver blue eyes fixed on her with an expression she could not read. He did not look amused. He did not look merciful. He looked certain. 12 hours earlier, Grace had still believed fate would protect her. Morning sunlight had spilled through the narrow windows of her grandmother's cottage, warming the faded wooden floor as she stood before a small mirror and fastened the pale blue dress she had saved for 3 years. It was simple by royal standards, with long sleeves and a modest silver ribbon at the waist, but it was the finest thing she owned. Eleanor Miller watched from beside the fireplace, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "You still believe he will acknowledge you tonight," she said quietly. Grace met her own gray-green eyes in the mirror. He said he needed time. Ryan had discovered their bond 3 years earlier, after returning injured from a border patrol. Grace had been the healer assigned to care for him. The moment their hands touched, something warm and ancient had awakened between them. Ryan had felt it too. She knew he had. But he had asked her to keep it secret until he secured his place as heir. Grace had agreed because she believed patience was a form of loyalty. She had treated his sleepless nights, guarded his private fears, and refused every other offer of companionship. Eleanor set down her cup. "Fate may point to a man, Grace. It cannot make him honorable." The warning followed Grace all the way to Blackwood Palace. By sunset, the royal grounds glittered beneath thousands of lanterns. Carriages lined the curved drive for nearly half a mile, carrying alphas, council families, and unmated heirs from every territory. Grace entered through the servants' arch because her invitation listed no rank. Inside, music drifted through the halls, soft and elegant, while noblewomen moved past her in silver gowns. Then she saw Ryan near the grand staircase. He was smiling at Victoria Reed. Grace stopped breathing when Ryan lifted Victoria's hand and carefully fastened a royal engagement bracelet around her wrist. The bracelet Grace had once believed would be hers. Ryan looked up and saw her. For one suspended second, the bond between them pulled tight. His smile vanished. Victoria turned to follow his gaze. Grace stood beneath the lantern light, holding the invitation that had suddenly become a warning. Then the palace bells rang, calling everyone to the mating ceremony, and Ryan offered Victoria his arm. The bells continued to ring as Grace followed the stream of guests into the royal hall, each note echoing through her chest like a warning she could not yet understand. The vast chamber had been built from pale stone and dark cedar, with moonlight pouring through windows nearly 30 feet tall. Silver banners hung between the columns, each marked with the black wolf crest of the royal family. At the far end, Alexander Blackwood sat upon the obsidian throne, still as winter beneath his ceremonial coat. Grace had seen paintings of the Alpha King, but none had captured the quiet authority in his silver blue eyes. He did not need to raise his voice to command the room. His presence alone made powerful wolves lower their heads. Ryan took his place below the throne with Victoria beside him. The royal bracelet gleamed on her wrist. Grace remained near the back, where servants and unranked guests had been instructed to stand. She told herself there had to be an explanation. Perhaps the bracelet represented an alliance. Perhaps Ryan had been forced to offer it before he could reveal the truth about their bond. Hope was fragile, but Grace held it anyway. It was all she had carried into the palace. The music faded. A royal herald stepped forward and announced that the heir would name the woman who would stand beside him as future Luna. Whispers moved through the hall. Victoria smiled as though the decision had already been written. Then Ryan looked directly at Grace. The hidden bond stirred beneath her ribs, warm and unmistakable. Every doubt vanished for one breath. He felt it. He had always felt it. "Grace Miller," Ryan called. Hundreds of faces turned toward her. Grace stepped away from the wall, her hands cold despite the warmth of the lanterns. The path to the center of the hall seemed longer than the half-mile of carriages outside. No one spoke as she passed. Some guests recognized her simple dress and servant invitation. Others noticed the pull between her and Ryan. By the time she reached the moon emblem set into the marble floor, the room had become completely silent. Ryan stood only a few feet away. His expression was controlled, but Grace saw the tension in his jaw. She remembered the frightened young man she had once comforted after midnight, the future king who had held her hand and promised that patience would be rewarded. "You asked me to trust you," she said softly. Ryan glanced toward the council members standing beside the throne. Marcus Kane watched without emotion. "I asked you to understand what duty requires," Ryan replied. Victoria lowered her gaze, and for the first time uncertainty crossed her face. Grace felt the bond tighten, waiting for truth. Ryan lifted his chin. "The Northern Realm needs strength, unity, and a Luna whose family can secure our borders." His words were formal, chosen for the crowd rather than for her. Grace searched his face for the man she knew. "And what does that make me?" Ryan hesitated. The hesitation hurt more than an answer. Then he took Victoria's hand. "A mistake I should have corrected years ago." A quiet gasp traveled through the hall. Grace did not move. She only felt the warmth beneath her ribs begin to turn cold as Ryan prepared to speak the words that would change both of their lives. Ryan faced Grace beneath the silver banners, but he did not meet her eyes when he spoke. "Before the moon and every witness gathered here, I reject the bond between Grace Miller and me." The words seemed to travel slowly across the royal hall, touching every column before reaching her. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the bond beneath her ribs pulled tight. Heat spread through her chest, sharp enough to steal her voice, and the marble floor tilted beneath her feet. Grace pressed one hand against her heart and refused to fall. Around her, whispers rose like wine through dry leaves. Some guests sounded shocked. Others sounded pleased. Ryan remained beside Victoria, his fingers still wrapped around hers. Grace searched his face for regret, but found only determination shaped by fear. This was not the man fate had promised her. This was the man who had hidden her for 3 years, accepted her loyalty in private, and denied her worth in public. Eleanor's warning returned with painful clarity. Fate could point toward a man. It could not make him honorable. Marcus Kane stepped forward from the council line, satisfaction barely concealed beneath his formal expression. "The heir has spoken," he announced. "The bond must now be released." Grace understood what he expected. She was supposed to beg. A rejected Omega often pleaded for mercy, hoping the stronger wolf would reconsider before the separation became permanent. Ryan expected it too. She saw it in the way his shoulders loosened, as though he believed her humiliation would end with her surrender. "Grace," he said quietly, softening his voice now that the entire kingdom was watching, "accept this with dignity, and you will be provided for." Provided for. As though 3 years of trust could be reduced to a room somewhere beyond the palace walls, and a monthly allowance offered out of guilt. Grace lowered her hand from her chest. Her fingers were trembling, but her voice was steady. "You asked me to wait until you were strong enough to choose me." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Circumstances changed." "No," she said. "Your circumstances revealed you." A silence deeper than the first settled over the hall. Victoria looked at Ryan, and uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Marcus frowned. On the obsidian throne, Alexander Blackwood leaned forward for the first time. Grace felt his attention settle upon her. Heavy but not cruel. Ryan's face hardened. "Do not make this more difficult than it must be." Grace looked at the man she had once believed was her future. The bond still called to her, but now she understood that destiny was not the same as devotion. She drew a careful breath. "I accept your rejection." The instant the words left her lips, a wave of silver light moved beneath the moon emblem at her feet. It traveled across the marble in widening circles, brightening every ancient symbol carved into the floor. The lantern flames bent toward Grace. Somewhere high above, the palace bells began ringing without human hands. Gasps filled the hall as the broken bond dissolved, but the light did not disappear. It gathered around Grace instead. Alexander rose slowly from his throne, his silver-blue eyes fixed on her as though he had just recognized something the rest of the kingdom had forgotten. The palace bells continued to ring as Alexander Blackwood stepped down from the obsidian throne. Every guest lowered their head, but Grace remained frozen beneath the silver light, struggling to understand why the ancient symbols still glowed around her feet. Ryan moved toward his father. The ceremony is not finished. Alexander did not look at him. His attention remained on Grace, as steady and unreadable as moonlight on winter water. "No," he said. "It is not." The quiet authority in his voice pressed through the hall, and several younger wolves backed away from the center. Grace felt the weight of so many powerful presences gathering around her. Her breath shortened. The broken bond had left her weak, and the pressure of the royal court made the air feel too heavy to carry. Then a small sound reached her through the silence. A frightened gasp. Near the last row of guests, a young Omega boy clutched the sleeve of an older servant. He could not have been more than 10 years old. His face had gone pale, and his knees began to bend beneath him. No one moved. The nobles nearest him stepped aside, more concerned with their formal clothes than the child struggling to breathe. Grace forgot the pain in her chest. She crossed the glowing circle and hurried toward him. "Give him space," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The servant lowered the boy carefully to the marble floor. "His name is Noah," she whispered. "The dominance in the room is too much for him." Grace knelt beside him. Noah's fingers trembled against his collar, and his eyes searched hers with silent fear. "Look at me," Grace said gently. "You are safe. Breathe when I breathe." She placed one hand over his and the other lightly against his shoulder. Warmth stirred in her palms, faint at first, then bright enough to soften the shadows around them. Grace drew in a slow breath. Noah followed. The pressure surrounding him eased as if an invisible door had opened. His shoulders relaxed. Color returned to his face. Across the hall the whispers changed. The guests who had called Grace weak now watched her with uneasy fascination. Ryan stared at the silver light moving from her hands, but he did not step closer. Victoria did. She took one uncertain step toward Noah before Marcus Kane caught her arm. "Do not approach," Marcus warned. "We do not know what she is doing." Grace looked up. "I am helping him." "You are using power that was never declared to the council," Marcus replied. His calm voice carried accusation beneath its courtesy. "That makes you dangerous." Noah tightened his grip around Grace's fingers. She turned back to him, refusing to let Marcus frighten the child. "There is nothing dangerous about kindness," she said. Alexander had stopped halfway between the throne and the moon emblem. One hand rested against the left side of his chest, where an old mark lay hidden beneath his ceremonial coat. The moment Grace's silver light surrounded Noah, a deep warmth awakened beneath that mark for the first time in 20 years. Alexander's expression changed. Not with fear, with recognition. Marcus saw it too, and the color left his face. "Your Majesty," he said quickly. "She must be removed from the hall." Alexander lowered his hand and looked directly at Grace. "No," he answered. "She stays." Marcus Kane's expression tightened, but his voice remained polished. "Your Majesty, compassion must not replace caution." The girl concealed an unregistered gift. An ancient power has awakened beneath the royal floor. Until the council understands what she is, she should be confined for the safety of the realm. Noah's hand closed around Grace's fingers. The boy was breathing normally now, yet fear returned to his eyes as two royal guards looked toward Alexander for instructions. Grace rose slowly, keeping herself between Noah and the center of the hall. The silver light around her hands faded, leaving only warmth against her palms. "I did not conceal anything," she said. "Before tonight I could calm pain and fear. I could not summon light." Marcus turned toward the gathered nobles. "Untrained power is more dangerous than deliberate power." "She saved a child," Victoria said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the silence. Marcus released her arm and faced her with measured surprise. Victoria looked from Noah to Grace. Everyone else stepped away. Grace stepped closer. Ryan frowned. "Victoria, this does not concern you." She lifted the wrist bearing his bracelet. "You placed your family's future on this hand. That makes the truth my concern. Grace saw irritation flash across Ryan's face. He had expected obedience from both women tonight. Instead, one had accepted his rejection without begging, and the other had begun questioning the men who arranged their union. Marcus opened his mouth, but a new voice reached them from the entrance. The truth has concerned my family for generations. Eleanor Miller walked into the royal hall beneath the watch of 2 palace attendants. Her gray hair had come loose from its careful knot, and she leaned upon a carved wooden cane, yet there was nothing fragile in the way she met the council's stare. Grace's breath caught. "Grandmother!" Eleanor stopped beside her. "The palace sent for me when the bells began to ring." Her gaze moved over the glowing symbols in the marble. Sadness softened her face. "I hoped this day would come gently." Marcus went pale. "Remove that woman." Alexander turned his head. "No one leaves unless I command it." Eleanor bowed to the king, then placed her hand over Grace's. "She is not using forbidden magic. She carries the last living line of the moon healers." A murmur swept through the hall. Grace had heard the name only in childhood stories, tales of healers who could sense corruption hidden beneath loyalty, promises, and even royal blood. Marcus recovered quickly. The moon healers vanished more than a century ago. "They hid," Eleanor corrected. "There is a difference." Alexander's silver-blue eyes narrowed. "Why?" Eleanor looked directly at Marcus. "Because men who survive through secrets fear women who can reveal them." The air changed. Grace felt it before anyone spoke. A cold pressure moved from Marcus toward the throne, thin and carefully concealed, like smoke beneath a locked door. Her newly awakened gift followed it. The world around her softened until only Alexander remained clear. Around his heart, shadows twisted through lines of dull silver. They were not part of him. They had been placed there slowly, layer after layer, over many years. Grace stepped toward the king without thinking. Alexander watched her approach, one hand resting over the hidden mark beneath his coat. "What do you see?" he asked. Grace looked past the crown, past the power, and into the exhaustion he had concealed from everyone in the room. "Someone has been poisoning your strength," she whispered. Then she turned toward Marcus Kane. "And he already knows I can prove it." For one suspended moment, no one in the royal hall moved. Marcus Kane stood beneath the silver banners with the stillness of a man measuring every possible escape. Then he smiled. "A frightened girl sees shadows and names treason," he said. "That is not proof. It is panic dressed as prophecy." Grace felt the room shift around his words. Several council members lowered their eyes. Others looked toward Alexander, waiting for the king to dismiss her claim. Ryan stepped forward instead. "Father, this ceremony has already become a spectacle. Let the guards escort Grace somewhere quiet until the council can examine what happened." Grace turned toward him. Only an hour earlier, the bond between them had still connected every breath. Now his voice held the careful distance of a stranger protecting his reputation. "Somewhere quiet," she repeated. "Is that what you called the years you asked me to remain hidden?" Ryan's expression tightened. "This is not about us. It became about the realm the moment you chose ambition over truth," Eleanor said. Marcus raised one hand. "Enough. The rejected Omega is unstable, her grandmother is repeating forbidden legends, and the king's health is now being used to accuse the council without evidence. Royal law is clear. Grace Miller must be detained until her abilities are understood." The 2 guards nearest the moon emblem exchanged uncertain glances. Neither moved until Marcus gave them a sharp nod. They advanced only a few steps before Alexander's voice stopped them. "Stand down." The guards immediately lowered their hands. Marcus faced the throne. "Your Majesty, with respect, the council has authority in matters involving unknown magic." Alexander descended the final step and came to stand between Grace and the guards. Up close, she could see the exhaustion hidden beneath his composed expression. Fine silver marked the dark hair near his temples, and the shadows around his heart pulsed faintly beneath the royal coat. Yet his presence remained unshaken. "The council has authority because the crown permits it," he said. Marcus's smile disappeared. "Then permit us to protect you." Alexander looked at Grace. The hall waited. Ryan waited. Even the bells above them seemed to hold their silence. "Grace Miller," Alexander said. Under an ancient law of the Northern Realm, the crown may claim responsibility for any unranked citizen threatened without proof of wrongdoing. A murmur spread through the nobles. Marcus took one step back. Grace understood before Alexander finished. Then I claim her under the protection of the crown. The words moved through the hall with quiet finality. Ryan's face went still. Victoria looked from father to son as though she had finally seen the distance between them. Marcus spoke quickly. You cannot place an unknown healer beside the throne. I placed her under my protection, Alexander replied. I did not place her beside anything. Grace studied him. She had been chosen, hidden, rejected, discussed, and judged without anyone asking what she wanted. She would not allow even kindness to become another cage. Am I your possession now? She asked. Gasps rose from the court, but Alexander did not appear offended. He met her gaze without demanding that she lower hers. No, he said. You are the first person in this hall who still has a choice. Grace felt Eleanor's hand touch her shoulder, warm and steady. Alexander extended his hand, but he did not reach for her. You may accept the crown's protection, refuse it, or leave this palace tonight. No one will stop you. Ryan stared at her as though he expected her to return to the familiar path, to choose fear, dependence, and him. Grace looked at the man fate had given her, then at the king who had offered her freedom. Slowly, she placed her hand in Alexander's. I accept protection, she said. Nothing more. For the first time that night, something almost gentle appeared in the Alpha King's eyes. Nothing more, he promised. Behind them, Marcus Kane turned pale, because Grace's choice had just placed the one woman who could expose him beyond his reach. The court did not celebrate Grace's choice, but it obeyed it. Within an hour, the royal hall had been rearranged for the engagement supper that Marcus insisted must continue. Long tables filled the chamber, covered with white linen, silver dishes, and winter roses. Music returned, though every note seemed strained beneath the questions no one dared ask. Grace sat beside Eleanor at a smaller table near the throne. Alexander remained several feet away, speaking quietly with the captain of the royal guard. He had kept his promise. He offered protection without demanding her closeness, and that distance made Grace trust him more than any grand declaration could have. Across the hall, Ryan sat beside Victoria, but his attention repeatedly drifted toward Grace. Each time their eyes nearly met, he looked away first. Victoria noticed. She set down her glass with controlled care. You should stop watching her, she told him. You rejected her. Ryan's expression hardened. You do not understand what happened between us. I understand that she believed you, Victoria replied. Before Ryan could answer, Marcus rose and lifted his glass. He praised the alliance between the Blackwood and Reed families, speaking of stronger borders and a peaceful future. The guests followed his example, though Alexander did not drink. Grace watched Marcus carefully. His smile was perfect. His shadow was not. A thin darkness moved around him, the same cold trace she had sensed near Alexander's heart. Then Victoria raised her glass. Grace felt the warning before Victoria took a sip. The silver light beneath Grace's skin turned suddenly cold. Do not drink that, she called. The music stopped. Victoria froze, but a drop had already touched her lips. Her glass slipped from her fingers and struck the table, spilling red wine across the white cloth. She swayed. Ryan caught her before she reached the floor. Victoria! His voice lost all ceremony. Grace was already moving. Marcus stepped into her path. Stay away from her. Something is wrong with the wine. Or you want everyone to believe that, he replied. Ryan looked up, fear becoming anger. What did you do? Grace stopped. The accusation hurt, but there was no time to defend herself. Victoria's breathing had become shallow, and her face had lost its color. Move, Grace said. Marcus did not. Alexander crossed the distance between them. He did not raise his voice. You heard her. Marcus stepped aside. Grace knelt beside Victoria and placed both hands around hers. Listen to me, she said gently. Stay with my voice. Silver warmth flowed from Grace's palms. The moment it touched Victoria, a vision opened inside Grace's mind. She saw a private chamber, a crystal bottle. Marcus pouring a clear liquid into a royal decanter while a servant stood trembling nearby. Then another memory surfaced. Marcus handing Ryan a sealed letter promising military support if Grace was rejected before the council. Grace gasped, but she did not release Victoria. The darkness moved from Victoria's body into the silver light, where it faded like mist under morning sun. Slowly Victoria opened her eyes. Ryan stared at Grace, relief and shame fighting across his face. Marcus spoke before anyone else could. A performance proves nothing. Grace rose, unsteady but certain. You poisoned her drink, she said. Marcus smiled faintly. Can you prove that? Alexander stepped beside Grace, not in front of her. He left her visible to the entire court. She will not need to prove it alone, he said. Victoria lifted her head from Ryan's shoulder. Her voice was weak but clear. The servant who poured my wine wore the council's seal. Every gaze turned toward Marcus. For the first time that night, he had no prepared answer. Marcus Kane recovered first. A seal can be stolen, he said. His voice steady despite the fear Grace could now sense beneath it. A servant can be bribed. This proves nothing against me. Alexander did not answer immediately. He looked toward the captain of the royal guard. Find the servant. Search the council chambers. No one leaves the palace grounds. The order moved through the hall like a closing door. Marcus remained composed, but the shadows around him tightened. Ryan helped Victoria into a chair, then turned toward Grace with an expression she had once dreamed of seeing. Regret. You saved her, he said. Grace looked at Victoria, not at him. She needed help. After everything that happened tonight, you still helped her. Kindness does not become weakness because someone failed to deserve it. Ryan stepped closer. Grace, I made a mistake. The room seemed to narrow around those words. Only hours earlier, she would have given anything to hear them. Now they felt too small for the damage they were meant to repair. You made a choice, she replied. There is a difference. Ryan glanced toward Alexander, then lowered his voice. The council pressured me. Marcus promised troops, land and protection for the northern border. He said our bond would weaken the throne. And you believed him because part of you already believed I was beneath it. Ryan flinched. I did not understand what you were. Grace finally met his eyes. That is the problem. You only understand my worth now that the room can see my power. The broken bond no longer pulled at her, but memory did. She remembered waiting in hidden rooms, healing his fear while he protected his pride. Would you want me back if my hands carried no light? She asked. Ryan opened his mouth. No answer came. Grace nodded once. Then there is nothing left to discuss. She turned away before he could offer another apology. Alexander stood several feet behind her. He had not interrupted. He had not spoken for her or stepped between her and Ryan. He had simply remained close enough that she knew she was safe and far enough that the choice was entirely hers. Then his hand moved to his chest. The motion was small, almost invisible, but Grace saw the shadows around his heart surge. His breath caught. Eleanor reached for Grace's arm. The poison is reacting to Marcus's fear. It knows it has been discovered. Alexander remained upright, but the color faded from his face. Grace crossed the distance between them. Your Majesty, I need permission to touch the mark. He looked down at her. Even now he did not command. What will it cost you? I do not know. Then I will not order it. Grace placed her palm over the fabric above his heart. I am not asking for an order. Silver light spread beneath her hand. The shadows resisted, cold and heavy, but she followed them through years of exhaustion, loneliness and silent pain. Alexander's hand closed gently around her wrist, not to stop her, but to steady her. The hall disappeared. Grace heard only his breathing and Eleanor's distant voice telling her to hold on. Then a memory opened inside the darkness. Marcus stood beside a younger Ryan, promising him the throne before his father could recover. Grace pulled the final shadow into the light. It dissolved, and Alexander drew a full breath for the first time in years. Grace swayed. He caught her before she fell, holding her with careful strength. Across the hall, the guards returned carrying a crystal bottle marked with Marcus Kane's private seal. The crystal bottle changed everything. Under Alexander's steady questioning, the servant confessed that Marcus had ordered the poison placed in Victoria's wine, and had used smaller doses against the king for years. The council chamber was sealed, the evidence was recorded, and Marcus lost the authority he had hidden behind for so long. No one raised a voice when the royal guards escorted him away. His power ended not with a battle, but with the truth spoken clearly before the entire court. Alexander remained beside Grace until the silver light faded from her hands. Strength had returned to his face, yet concern filled his eyes when he saw how tired she had become. "You owe this kingdom nothing more tonight," he said. Grace looked across the hall. Ryan stood alone near the moon emblem, while Victoria had removed the engagement bracelet and placed it on the table between them. The alliance built on deception had already begun to fall apart. Alexander turned toward the gathered nobles. Grace Miller entered this palace without rank, protection, or influence. She was judged by what others believed she lacked. Yet when a child needed comfort, she helped him. When Victoria needed healing, she helped her. When I needed the truth, she risked her strength to reveal it. He paused, then looked at Grace rather than the court. "My protection ends whenever you choose. You may return home, remain as the royal healer, or leave the northern realm entirely. No crown will decide for you." The freedom in his words touched her more deeply than any promise of destiny. Ryan stepped forward. "Grace, please. I can repair what I broke." She met his gaze without anger. "You wanted me when I became valuable to the throne. He valued me when I had nothing to offer him." Ryan lowered his eyes. Grace turned to Alexander. For the first time, the Alpha King seemed uncertain. He descended from the raised platform and knelt before her, bringing himself level with the woman everyone else had expected to kneel. "I claimed your protection before the court," he said. "Your heart is not mine to claim, can only be given. Grace Miller, will you choose me?" The hall became silent. Grace remembered Eleanor's warning that fate could point toward a man but could not make him honorable. She finally understood. Destiny had introduced her to Ryan, but choice had revealed Alexander. She placed her hand in his. "Yes," she said, "because you never asked me to become smaller." Silver light rose around them, gentle as dawn. The ancient symbols beneath the floor awakened once more, and Grace's wolf answered with her first clear call. Alexander stood beside her, not before her. Then Ryan, Victoria, and every member of the court bowed to their new Luna. The moon had once chosen a mate for Grace. In the end, Grace chose her king.